Hi, everyone.
Hello again. We're continuing to look at Revelation 1 through 3, and the theme of this section is, why do you attend your church? And if you see our eyes looking over there to your right, it's because we're reading this from a screen, having no hard copy. But we thought the trade-off in eye contact would give us better coherence in the argument. So if you'll bear with us. We noticed when we were in our first 4 or 5 years out of the Watchtower, we had almost nothing but conservative friends in those days. And these evangelicals, we had already noticed a pattern about their church life. And that pattern was, most of them had no deep roots in a local church fellowship. Most of them were not going to the church they grew up in anymore. Some of them didn't go to church at all because they couldn't find a church that was conservative or from their perspective, loyal enough or pure enough for their taste.
So they hopped from church to church, and
some only periodically dropped into some churches, not in any pattern visiting.
Yeah.
And some made a habit of visiting other churches. Anywhere where they could find, I suppose, pleasant fellowship and a reasonable degree of purity.
Now,
so that disturbed us.
Those first 5 years, we were kind of doing that because we were fresh out of the Watchtower and trying to figure out where to go to church. So I think everyone, or most of our audience, will relate to that, because when you leave the Watchtower, you wonder, where should I go?
Of course.
And you experiment a lot with different churches.
But to see people doing nothing but church hopping was disturbing. And so we wrote this document, and it's been fleshed out since, and here's where we address the question of why do Christians attend the churches they do. And this is our summary of the reasons that we have observed, not just in those first 4 or 5 years, but in the 15 years after that.
We all need to ask ourselves the same searching question. Why do I attend my church? For the great majority of us, the reason is simply that we grew up in our church or came to faith there. For a great many of us, often in addition to the familiarity factor, we attend our church because we like the type of worship, the liveliness. Many believers are attracted to churches alive in a different sense, communities of Christians which are busy with activities, groups, social outreach, or other community-related busyness. On the other hand, some of us, especially older believers, attend specific churches just because our church is not lively, but sedate, quiet, calming after a hard week.
Is that us?
That's us now.
But not then.
These reasons, let's face it, have more to do with culture and disposition of character than with theology or the Bible. That is, our reasons are more subjective than objective. Less to do with truth than peace. Certainly more to do with pleasure and comfort than discipline and correction. But if we are in a normal North American church environment, whether attending a live church or attending what too many evangelicals call dead churches,
like our church,
we might do well to consider the messages Christ himself sent to the 7 churches of West Asia, Turkey, at the end of the 1st century.
We might just drop in a personal note here that we've had some of our evangelical friends attend our church occasionally and come away with, well, I learned something, but it was so...
Yeah, it wasn't what they were familiar with. They were used to more lively music, more lively sermons being given in a more lively method.
Yeah, in other words, a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
And in most of the older churches, you don't get a lot of emotion if that's what you need to feel spiritual.
And if you're wanting more, if you're more interested in the content and in the intellectual aspect of the sermon, that you're learning something new every time, it wouldn't have felt very comfortable to them.
So we go on in the sermon. We will not travel far into Revelation chapters 2 and 3 before we discover that Christ is not encouraging local Christians to measure themselves by themselves, i.e. to sit comfortably as possible in the church environment to which they were accustomed. No, he who searches all things, whose eyes are like a flame of fire, was exhorting his churches to judge themselves by a far higher standard. Where correction is necessary, we must hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. The Christ of the Apocalypse pulls no punches. Although he praises that which deserves praise, Christ has, for these 7 churches, more chastisement than comfort. There are, among the 7 churches, 5 which get mixed or condemnatory messages. It's far more likely we would have been attending those assemblies than the 2 who received Christ's undiluted praise, Smyrna and Philadelphia. Let us start, therefore, with one of the churches which received a mixed review. So our question for the next video is, would you attend church in Sardis? And so we just wanted to give you a preview of that next video. But this is Christ's message to the church in Sardis, the first 6 verses of Revelation chapter 3. And by the way, we're not going to treat these churches in geographical order as they are in the book of Revelation, but rather in groups or types of churches. So this is chapter 3, verses 1 to 6.
And I'm reading from the New World Translation. And to the angel of the congregation in Sardis write, these are the things that he says, who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your deeds, that you have the name that you are alive, but you are dead. Become watchful and strengthen the things remaining that were ready to die, for I have not found your deeds fully performed before my God. Therefore, continue mindful of how you have received and how you heard, and go on keeping it, and repent. Certainly, unless you wake up, I shall come as a thief, and you will not know at all at what hour I shall come upon you. Nevertheless, you do have a few names in Sardis that did not defile their outer garments, and they shall walk with me in white ones, because they are worthy. He that conquers will thus be arrayed in white outer garments, and I will by no means blot out his name from the book of life, but I will make acknowledgment of his name before my Father and before his angels. Let the one who has an ear hear what the Spirit says to the congregations.
Well, here we have I guess what you would call, with our experience, a normal church. That it has some good aspects and it has some negative. And it even says that there's just a few who are walking in purity in that church. So I guess there's the big question. Would you attend a church like this if you were a Jehovah's Witness? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And if you're an evangelical Christian today, probably not.
But if you were of those few that he has a good report on, and you left, what would that do to that church?
Yeah, that's the key question here. So what is the counsel? And there's that phrase, strengthen the things that remain.
And that did change everything for us when we got that in our head. Strengthen the things that remain.
So next time we'll go more deeply into Christ's letter, his analysis of the problem in Sardis, and deal with what some famous Christians have said about the Church of Sardis.
And we will link a video that I did called Slow Church. It was 2 Christians that were talking about the need for more local church support, and how without local support to a church, getting roots there, it's impossible, or it's a lot less likely that you're going to be helping the local community as well. The church is there not just for you, but for your community. So how do you support it?
Yeah, that's a very big point. So next time, would you attend the church in Sardis?